Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! Sun crept through the curtains in Emma's bedroom. She stirred, her eyes fluttering open to face another day in the small town she called home. As she stretched and yawned, her gaze fell upon the clothes laid out on the chair beside her bed, a crisp button-down shirt, tailored slacks, and a smart blazer. A smile tugged at her lips, a mixture of excitement and apprehension coursing through her veins. For years, Emma had hidden her true self, conforming to societal expectations and dressing in a way that never felt quite right. But those days were behind her now. She had made the decision to live authentically, embracing her identity as a crossdresser and no longer confining herself to the narrow constraints of gender norms. As she dressed, savoring the feel of the fabric against her skin, Emma couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought her to this point. The countless nights spent agonizing over her identity, the fear of rejection, and the liberating moment when she finally decided to be true to herself. It hadn't been an easy road, but it was hers. Fully dressed, Emma stood before the mirror, adjusting her tie with practiced fingers. The reflection that stared back at her was one of confidence and self-assurance. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. The small town she lived in wasn't known for its progressive views, and her decision to live openly had not been without consequences. As she made her way downstairs, the crunch of paper underfoot caught her attention. Bending down, she picked up an envelope that had been slipped under her front door. Her heart sank as she recognized the now familiar handwriting, another anonymous message. With trembling hands, she opened it, bracing herself for the contents. The words jumped out at her, a jumble of hate and ignorance scrawled across the page. Freak. Abomination. Leave our town. The usual vitriol she had come to expect. Emma closed her eyes, willing herself to remain strong. She wouldn't let them win, wouldn't let their narrow-mindedness drive her away from the place she called home. Crumpling the paper in her fist, she tossed it into the trash can. It joined a growing collection of similar messages, a testament to the struggle she faced daily. But for every hateful note, there were also messages of support, allies who stood by her side. She clung to those, using them as a shield against the negativity that threatened to overwhelm her. With a deep breath, Emma stepped out onto her porch, ready to face the day. The street was quiet, houses lining either side with manicured lawns and white picket fences. It was the very picture of small-town America, but beneath the surface, tensions simmered. As she walked down the sidewalk, Emma couldn't help but notice the curtains twitching in nearby windows, curious eyes peering out at her. She held her head high, refusing to let their stares intimidate her. This was who she was, and she had every right to exist in this space. The local grocery store loomed ahead, its faded sign a familiar sight. Emma hesitated for a moment before pushing through the doors. The cool, air-conditioned interior washed over her, a stark contrast to the warmth outside. As she grabbed a basket and began to navigate the aisles, she could feel the weight of eyes upon her. Whispers followed in her wake, hushed conversations that fell silent as she approached. Emma focused on her shopping list, determined not to let it affect her. She reached for a carton of eggs, her hand brushing against another's. "Oh, I'm sorry," a familiar voice said. Emma looked up to see Mrs. Thompson, her next-door neighbor, quickly withdrawing her hand. The older woman's eyes widened as she recognized Emma, a mixture of surprise and discomfort flashing across her face. Mrs. Thompson! Emma greeted with a polite nod, trying to keep her voice steady. The woman hesitated, her gaze darting around nervously. Emma, how are you? I'm doing well, thank you, Emma replied, forcing a smile. And you? Mrs. Thompson mumbled a response, her discomfort palpable. She hurriedly grabbed a carton of eggs and scurried away, leaving Emma standing alone in the aisle. The interaction, brief as it was, left a bitter taste in Emma's mouth. Mrs. Thompson had always been kind to her, often bringing over baked goods and chatting over the fence. But now, faced with Emma's true self, she could barely make eye contact. As Emma continued her shopping, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every aisle seemed to hold another set of judging eyes, another whispered comment. She tried to focus on her task, methodically checking items off her list, but the weight of the atmosphere was suffocating. At the checkout, Emma braced herself for another potential confrontation. The cashier, a young man she didn't recognize, rang up her items without comment. As she reached for her wallet, a voice behind her made her freeze. Well, well.
If it isn't the town freak.
Emma turned slowly, coming face to face with Brad Johnson, a man known for his conservative views and loud opinions. He stood there, arms crossed, a sneer twisting his features. Excuse me? Emma said, her voice low but firm. Brad's sneer deepened. You heard me. Prancing around town, making a mockery of decency. It's disgusting. The cashier's eyes widened, darting between Emma and Brad. Other customers in line began to shift uncomfortably, the tension in the air palpable. Emma took a deep breath, willing herself to remain calm. I'm just trying to buy groceries, Brad. I'm not bothering anyone.
Your very existence is a bother.
Brad spat.
You're corrupting our town with your perversion.
Emma felt her cheeks burn with a mixture of anger and shame. She opened her mouth to respond, but another voice cut through the air.
That's enough, Brad.
Emma turned to see Sarah, the owner of the local bookstore, stepping forward. Her eyes blazed with righteous anger as she faced Brad. Emma has every right to be here, just like anyone else, Sarah continued, her voice steady and firm. Your bigotry and hate have no place in this town. Brad's face reddened, his fists clenching at his sides.
You're just as bad as him. Her. Whatever it is. You're enabling this sickness.
Sarah stood her ground, unflinching in the face of Brad's anger. The only sickness here is your intolerance. Emma is a valued member of this community, and I won't stand by while you harass her. Other voices began to chime in, some supporting Sarah, others backing Brad. The grocery store had become a battleground, with Emma caught in the middle. She felt overwhelmed, her heart racing as the argument escalated around her.
Enough!
The sharp voice of Mr. Grayson, the store manager, cut through the chaos.
This is a place of business, not a debate hall. Brad, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Now.
Brad's face contorted with rage, but faced with the stern gaze of Mr. Grayson, he backed down. With a final glare at Emma, he stormed out of the store, the bell above the door jangling angrily in his wake. As the tension in the air began to dissipate, Emma felt a gentle hand on her arm. She looked up to see Sarah's kind eyes gazing at her with concern. Are you okay, Emma? Sarah asked softly. Emma nodded, not trusting her voice. She quickly paid for her groceries, mumbling a thank you to the shell-shocked cashier, and hurried out of the store. Sarah followed, carrying some of Emma's bags. Once outside, Emma leaned against the wall, taking deep breaths to calm her racing heart. Sarah stood beside her, a comforting presence in the aftermath of the confrontation. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that," Sarah said, her voice filled with genuine empathy. "Brad's always been a loudmouth, but this is unacceptable." Emma managed a weak smile. "Thank you for standing up for me. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't been there." Sarah squeezed her arm gently. "You're not alone in this, Emma. There are people in this town who support you, who see you for the wonderful person you are." As they walked back to Emma's house, Sarah chatted about her bookstore, upcoming community events, anything to take Emma's mind off the incident. Emma found herself relaxing, grateful for the distraction and the simple act of kindness. At Emma's front door, Sarah helped her with the groceries, insisting on making sure she got settled. As Emma put away the last of the items, Sarah leaned against the kitchen counter, a thoughtful expression on her face. "You know," Sarah began, "I've been thinking. Maybe it's time we did something more proactive about this situation." Emma looked up, curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" Sarah's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. "Well, ignorance is often at the root of prejudice. What if we organized some kind of educational event? A way to help people understand cross-dressing and gender expression better?" Emma felt a flicker of hope at the suggestion. "Do you really think that would help?" Sarah nodded emphatically. "I do. It won't change everyone's mind overnight, but it's a start. We could have speakers, maybe even a panel discussion. Give people a chance to ask questions in a respectful environment." As Sarah continued to outline her ideas, Emma found herself becoming more and more excited. The thought of being able to share her experiences, to help others understand, was both terrifying and exhilarating. "We could host it at the community center," Sarah mused. "I'm sure we could get some local businesses to sponsor it. Oh, and we could reach out to LGBTQ+ organizations in the city for resources and support." Emma nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. "We could have a section on the history of cross-dressing, dispel some of the myths and misconceptions." Sarah beamed, clearly thrilled by Emma's enthusiasm. "Exactly! And maybe we could even have a fashion show or exhibition showcasing different styles and expressions." As they continued to brainstorm, Emma felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. For the first time in weeks, she felt hopeful about her place in this community. It wouldn't be easy, and there would undoubtedly be opposition, but the idea of taking action, of working towards understanding and acceptance, filled her with a sense of purpose. The rest of the day passed in a blur of planning and phone calls. Sarah's enthusiasm was infectious, and soon they had a small group of allies committed to helping organize the event. Emma found herself overwhelmed by the outpouring of support, each message and offer of help chipping away at the isolation she had been feeling. As evening fell, Emma sat on her porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in vibrant hues. The events of the day played through her mind, the hate-filled note, the confrontation at the grocery store, and the unexpected turn towards hope and action. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be more confrontations, more whispered judgments, more anonymous notes filled with hate. But for the first time since she had decided to live openly, Emma felt truly empowered. She wasn't just surviving in this town. She was fighting for her place in it. The sound of footsteps drew her attention, and Emma looked up to see her neighbor, Tom, approaching. He was an older man, quiet and reserved, who had lived next door for as long as Emma could remember. She tensed, unsure of what to expect. Tom stopped at the edge of her property, his weathered face unreadable in the fading light.
"Evening, Emma,"
he said, his voice gruff but not unkind.
"Good evening, Tom,"
Emma replied, trying to keep her voice steady. There was a moment of silence, the only sound the chirping of crickets in the growing darkness. Then Tom cleared his throat, seeming to struggle with what he wanted to say.
I heard about what happened at the grocery store today,"
he finally managed.
"That wasn't right, what Brad did."
Emma blinked in surprise, not having expected this. "Oh, thank you, Tom." Tom shifted uncomfortably, his eyes not quite meeting Emma's.
"Look, I can't say I understand all this cross-dressing business. It's not something I ever thought about before, but—"
He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts.
"But you've always been a good neighbor. Quiet, keeps your yard nice. That hasn't changed."
Emma felt a lump forming in her throat, touched by Tom's simple but sincere words. "I appreciate that, Tom. Really." Tom nodded, still looking a bit uncomfortable but determined. "My grandson, he's been trying to explain some of this stuff to me. Says the world's changing, and we old folks need to try and keep up." He chuckled softly, shaking his head.
"I don't know about all that,
but I know treating people with respect is important. So, I guess what I'm trying to say is, you're still welcome to my famous barbecue ribs at the next block party." Emma couldn't help the smile that spread across her face. "I wouldn't miss it for the world, Tom. Those ribs are the best in town." Tom's face relaxed into a small smile of his own.
"Damn right they are. You have a good night, Emma."
As Tom walked back to his own house, Emma felt a warmth spreading through her chest. It wasn't acceptance, not really, but it was a start. Tom's words, awkward as they were, represented a willingness to try, to look past his own discomfort and see her as a person. The interaction left Emma feeling contemplative. She thought about the spectrum of reactions she had faced since coming out, from Brad's open hostility to Sarah's enthusiastic support, from Mrs. Thompson's discomfort to Tom's awkward but genuine attempt at understanding. Each person was on their own journey, grappling with change in their own way. As night fell fully, Emma made her way back inside, her mind buzzing with plans for the upcoming educational event. She knew it wouldn't solve everything overnight, but it was a step in the right direction. By sharing her story, by putting a human face to the concept of cross-dressing, she hoped to bridge the gap of understanding in her community. Settling into her favorite armchair, Emma pulled out her laptop and began to type. She had decided to write a personal essay to be shared at the event, detailing her journey of self-discovery and acceptance. As her fingers flew across the keys, she found herself delving into memories, both painful and joyous. She wrote about the first time she had tried on her sister's clothes as a child, the exhilarating feeling of rightness that had coursed through her. She described the years of confusion and self-doubt, the struggle to reconcile her desires with societal expectations, the pain of hiding her true self, of living a life that felt like a constant performance. But she also wrote about the moment of revelation, when she had finally accepted who she was, the liberation of embracing her identity, of allowing herself to express her gender in a way that felt authentic. She described the joy of finding communities online, of realizing she wasn't alone in her experiences. As she wrote, Emma found herself crying, the emotions of the past few weeks pouring out onto the page. But these weren't tears of sadness or frustration. They were tears of catharsis, of finally giving voice to feelings she had long kept bottled up. Hours passed, the night growing deeper as Emma continued to write. She was so engrossed in her task that she almost missed the soft ping of an incoming email. Curious, she opened her inbox, her eyes widening as she read the sender's name. It was from Lisa, her childhood best friend who had moved away years ago. They had kept in sporadic contact over social media, but hadn't had a real conversation in ages. The subject line read, "I heard the news. I'm proud of you." With trembling fingers, Emma opened the email. Lisa's words were filled with warmth and support, expressing admiration for Emma's courage in living her truth. She shared her own journey of coming out as bisexual in college, the challenges she had faced, and the freedom she had found in authenticity. The email concluded with an offer of support. Lisa wanted to come back to town for the educational event, to stand by Emma's side and share her own experiences with the community. The gesture brought fresh tears to Emma's eyes. The realization that her old friend was willing to travel across the country to support her, overwhelming in its kindness. As Emma typed out a heartfelt reply, accepting Lisa's offer with gratitude, she felt a renewed sense of strength. The day had been a roller coaster of emotions, from the depths of despair at the grocery store to the heights of hope with Sarah's plan, and now Lisa's support. She thought about the anonymous note that had started her day, the hateful words that had sought to diminish her. In the face of the love and support she had experienced since then, those words seemed to lose their power. They were still hurtful, still a reality she had to face, but they no longer defined her experience.
Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!